Hi everyone. This week I'm doing my Sunday post a little differently and I've decided to bring you a video rather than a written blog post. It's report time and our brains are just full of all of our students' achievements and how that relates to the curriculum and our teaching and all of those things and reporting that back to parents. So I thought, oh, let's reduce the cognitive load for teachers this week and present you with a video rather than a written piece. A few years ago, I was a teaching principal, and shout out to all the teaching principals out there because speaking of cognitive load, it is massive. You pretty much teach full time and run all of the administrative functions of your small school. I'd been in this school for nearly a year, and we'd implemented a new reading and phonics program, which was just going swimmingly. The results in the reading were great. It was systematic. The way that it had been planned and presented meant that my prep time was about 20 minutes a week for the full week of teaching, which I absolutely loved. But I was bothered by the fact that the student writing wasn't where I really wanted it to be. I didn't feel that they were writing enough. I felt that the things that I tried worked okay, but often they worked well for the children who could already write reasonably well. They weren't bringing along all of the students together. But what I didn't want was to have some sort of group rotation situation. Because it cuts down the amount of instructional time that you're able to give to the students, but also because it bothers me that in the rotation situation, we often are not getting high impact teaching for the students who are not with the teacher at that time. So they might be working on some sort of practice activity or something, but I just didn't want students without adult support for large chunks of instructional time. In the writing, I felt that there was just so much curriculum content to cover. And as we know in Australia, we've got a whole host of content descriptors and the achievement standard that's big enough to choke a horse. And we have to try and get all of this stuff into our programs and teach explicitly as well as bring all the skills along. And I was really frustrated because I thought there's got to be a better way. How do we support our poor students who, either they take on what you've said and then they don't expand on that at all, or they get to their desk for their writing and they write a sentence and then you say, what else could you write? And they're like, I don't know. And so you end up supporting those students so much that the lines between whose work is this just become really blurry. I was also teaching a multi-age class, so I had year 3, 4, 5 and 6, and within that class a range of student learners, everyone from still really working to develop sound word level skills to almost able to produce a really good piece of text at that full text level on their own, but what they needed was refining and control building in that. So I thought, Jocelyn, there's got to be another way, and there was. And so I thought to myself, as a teaching principal, I don't have time to be reinventing wheels. I don't want to go and spend a gajillion dollars on a commercial program that's only going to meet the needs of some of my students, remembering that large diversity of students who I had in my group. I wanted something that was systematized. So for every unit I planned, the steps were just there, and I changed up what happened in those steps based on my focus at the time for language and writing, teaching, and the text that we were using, because some texts lend themselves differently to some things rather than others. So I wanted something that was really simple, that gave me my weekends back. I was already working till 6, 7 o'clock every night as a teaching principal. I'm a mum of 3. I needed to be able to be a mum and a wife and a friend and all of those things. So I put together, with the help of some great colleagues, a fantastic little system that I want to share with you. I'm really hoping it will help transform the way that you plan and make it simple, give you the certainty that you are covering the parts of the Australian curriculum that you need to, but also really important things like grammar. Teaching grammar in context, which for a lot of us just scares us because we were not taught this stuff at school or uni ourselves, and sometimes only have that tentative hold on what the different sentence types are, let alone how to teach it well. So by building that into this structure, it makes life so much easier. The method that I came up with is transferable, and I have shared it with others, and they are getting similar results. So they are really loving the fact that it's simple, that they can plan with certainty, that it doesn't take a whole lot of time. You can plan collaboratively with others, and that cuts the time down as well. And the most important thing is that they're seeing the results for their students in the classroom, and it's making a real difference. Because when you use a gradual release of responsibility model, sometimes called I do, we do, you do, sometimes called the explicit teaching model, students are supported at the point of learning where they're up to, and then you can go on to build the skills and then step back and allow them to take it over. So others have benefited from this, and I think you can too. What I'd like to share with you today is about the importance of building background knowledge. So we all know that the first step in teaching is to activate background knowledge. That's a really simple thing, and we do that. But I think we don't spend enough time on that. So if we're using a text of whatever sort, whether it be a picture book or a short novel, whatever is appropriate for your students and context, if we're teaching using a text, it's not enough simply to read the story and then say, okay, we're going to do some work with this now. You can take a week and a half to really build the field around the language of the text, the content in the text structure. Children need to understand about how the text structure is influenced by the purpose of the text. So there's so much more to unpacking a text than simply reading it and saying, we're going to do an activity about this now. So what can that look like? There's a whole range of things that you can do to build background knowledge for students so that they've got a really strong foundation. And remember, if you're teaching in a disadvantaged school or in a school where you have some kids in your classroom who come from a language background other than English, or they don't have access to documentaries and museums and those broader world concepts that many of our students do, this is even more important for you, because the key to having children really understand text is the schema. It's the background knowledge that they have. Once children understand what they're reading, then they can use that as the stimulus for their language development and writing. The purpose here is, though I will say, it's not to have the students read the text and decode it themselves. It's around learning language and building language and knowledge to facilitate writing. So some of the ways you can build that background knowledge is by having students recite the text with you. So if you have a longer picture book or a short novel, you might want to choose an excerpt that they just learned to recite, or you might want to write an abridged version, 200 or 300 words that the kids can learn to say along with you, so that they can kind of, feel the language in their mouth. And I know that sounds a bit strange, but it always just is how it strikes me, that in order to be able to really understand something, we have to know what it feels like. And so having them recite the text is a really good way to do that. You can ask questions, and we're pretty used to this one. So we'll start with our basic surface level questions and then move on to our deeper inferential thinking questions. So that's another thing to include. And you're probably doing that one already. Drama. Third point I will make is around drama. And drama is such a fabulous way of helping children build the field around the language and concepts and characters and storyline of a text. And two very simple drama activities come to mind for me. The first one is to just have them act it out with you or someone else as the narrator, choosing either the whole text depending on the length of text, or, as I said before, that excerpt, or the piece that you write, the short and abridged version, having students actually act it out and have to use their body engages them in a really, really active way. Another way of building the field around a text is by having children make comparisons to other texts. So that's one of those comprehension strategies around text to self, text to world that I'm sure so many people are familiar with. But what we might not realize is that that not only supports reading comprehension, it also supports building the field for writing. Because when you need to compare one text with another, or you build a personal connection, you are really internalizing what the text is about. So those connections, the text connections with yourself, with the world, with other texts, are really, really important. An idea that you may be less familiar with is actually labeling pictures. So copying a picture from the text or displaying it in some way and having children just write labels. I love this. This is my number one game changer in terms of facilitating maximum participation in a lesson, whether it be an English writing lesson or a science lesson or whatever it is across the curriculum. This idea alone has just brought such a change to my teaching practice. So you have the picture and the labeling happens with a small group. So in your mind, picture an A3 piece of paper. And in the center of that piece of paper, there's a picture. And it could be a photo from your science unit, but we're talking about English today, so it'll be a picture that relates to the text that you've just read. There are 3 or 4 children sitting with this one piece of paper, and every one of them is holding a pencil. There is no assigning the role of scribe to the most competent writer, because all that does is gives the message to the children who are less comfortable and less confident that, well, that's somebody else's job. I just get to sit here and maybe watch, but probably not even. Every child has a pencil. And the labeling that happens occurs at whatever level of transcription the child is able to produce. So if the child cannot write anything, they can draw you a little picture, or they can write the initial sounds of the word that they want to write. They can write words themselves and make it really, really clear that this is not about spelling. This is about idea generation. So if it's a picture from, say, wombat stew, and the child wants to write pot because there's a pot in the picture, they can sound out pot. If they want to write stew but they're not quite sure and they write STOO, that's an absolutely valid level of contribution for that child because that's where their skills sit. Remembering that your instruction around spelling and other transcription skills happen outside of this process, not within this process. This is about language building, engagement with the writing process, and helping children feel comfortable to put things on paper. On the flip side, if the student can produce a complex sentence about what they see, fantastic, go ahead. Group the children in multi-ability groups and create a classroom culture where we help each other, not do for, but that we don't need to feel embarrassed if we don't know how to spell something, and everybody respects everyone else's learning journey. So a multi-level group, every child has a pencil, every child writes at the same time, which means that you're going to have writing that's heading in all different directions. Some of it might be upside down, some of it might be on a slant. It doesn't matter. The point of this is not about producing a beautiful text. It's about having children build the confidence to take a pencil, put it to a piece of paper, and write the whole time. By leaving the level of text transcription to the kids based on what they're comfortable with, this task then becomes low stakes. Because often when we ask children to write on paper, they can be really scared of making errors. because even if you rub out your mistake, you can still see it. So by making a task low stakes, spelling doesn't matter, how neat it is doesn't matter. They will need to write reasonably small though so that everyone can share. But make it low stakes and the engagement level will increase. Having children label pictures also gives you an assessment opportunity, a diagnostic assessment opportunity for your broader work. So what the children choose to do on their own then becomes an indicator to you of what the next steps are. And you as the teacher will use your knowledge of your students to determine, do they actually have the skill to move to the next step? Or do they have the skill, but they're still sitting in that point where they're not confident, or that skill hasn't become automatic for them? There is loads of information that you get to glean from engaging in this task. The most important is children with pen to paper, pencil to paper, the entire time feeling comfortable and confident to engage in a task with their peers. It is absolute magic to see. The final way that you can support your students to build background knowledge of the text you're reading is to read lots of other connected texts. So if you're reading a non-fiction book, having a look at that text and saying which concepts may be a little blurry here. If you live in an inland area and their story includes something about the beach or the ocean, read non-fiction texts to them about the beach or the ocean or whatever it is that they need to understand. We presume as adults that children have a working knowledge of a whole host of things, but the reality is that they just don't. So this is another thing that, yes, it is about comprehension, but it's also about building the field, the bucket of knowledge that children need to be able to draw upon to be able to write confidently. So many times when kids can't write, it's not that they don't have the spelling or the transcription skills, it's that they don't have anything to say because they don't have the background knowledge that will really support them. So include in this teaching, and even before you start the unit, plan ahead. Know that you're going to be teaching this particular text and using that as the stimulus for what's to come. But 3 weeks before you start to teach that, start building the field with other fiction texts and non-fiction texts that really tune the children in to the concepts they're going to have control over in order to be able to write well. So you might be thinking that your school has a particular way of doing things and that you couldn't utilize what I'm sharing with you today. What I love about this system that has been developed is that it's not just about that it's really rigid and you must do every single step every single time and there's only a set way to do it. I really like this way because it gives you rigor and certainty about addressing the curriculum, but it also gives you flexibility. Depending on the age of your students, you will have a different focus based in the Australian curriculum English scope and sequence, and that document will tell you exactly where you need to be pinpointing your teaching to make sure you're on track for that year level. You can dip in and out, go deep or shallow, depending on the needs of your students. You will also be able to say, well, I'm actually also going to do this because that's my school's focus, or that's something that I've been working on with my class. What I'm sharing with you doesn't require you to abandon what you're already doing. It is a rethink of how we plan. It's a rethink of how we structure so that all children are supported. I also love in teaching in this way that I call it a low floor, high task ceiling. I may have pinched that from somewhere and not realised, but there's something in it for everyone. For your students who are the least developed and struggle the most to produce anything beyond a simple sentence, it will facilitate their learning. For your more advanced students, who may already be able to produce a good text for you, it will bring conscious knowledge of the strategies and the techniques that are really needed to take their writing to the next level. That's what NAPLAN asks for. NAPLAN requires that students can show control over what it is they're using. And that's really obvious because you won't have 5 complex sentences in a row then. You'll have a mixture of sentences, and that's from the NAPLAN writing marking rubric as well. It will also enable them to transfer those skills across other curriculum areas. So teaching in this way addresses the needs, not just of the middle, because when we teach to the middle, those who need more support don't get it because they need quite a high level of guidance, and those who are more advanced don't get it because we're busy trying to reach a middle ground. Actually, lots of kids miss out when we teach to the middle. But teaching in a way that's structured to start with a high degree of teacher-led work and control, if you want to put it that way, and gradually releasing that is really, really important so that you can reach every child. The inbuilt flexibility in teaching with this structure and sequence extends to age. Remember, when I developed it, I had a group of students who I was teaching from year 3 to 6 with that full range of abilities. I didn't have the time, the inclination, or anything else to develop 4 different sets of lessons for the 4 different age groups. I needed one really easy to plan way to teach writing and grammar and language, because we know that when we teach grammar in context and language in context, it builds our children's spoken skills, spoken English skills, which then they can transfer to their writing. So I needed one way that I could address the needs of all the students. It sounds like magic, it's really not. Although the change that you will see in your students in teaching in this way can sometimes feel like magic, particularly when you watch your strugglers be engaged and confident and happy. There's so much more to tell you, and I've kept you long enough, so I can't go into a lot more detail now about other things. But in the next video that I make in response to the high degree of cognitive load all of our teachers are experiencing at the moment, I'm going to actually unpack some of the other details for you. I don't want you to miss out on seeing when this next video comes out, this next vlog, I guess it's called, this video blog post. So underneath this video and on the page you're watching it, there is a contact page. If you are not already a subscriber to my website, pop your details in there. I promise never to bombard your inbox with a whole bunch of irritating emails. I hate it when that happens to me. And I can be really quite precious about who I share my email address with, because I don't want daily emails from people that have no relevance to anything I'm doing. So I promise that I will never do that to you. But I will let you know when the next blog post is out, and I may occasionally let you know about some other things that I'm doing. In the contact page below, there's also an opportunity for you to share with me what are your top 2 pain points when it comes to teaching writing. We all have them, whether it's the child who needs someone to sit with them because they can't remember what it is they're going to say, or whether it's the high frequency words that are continually spelled incorrectly. Or whether it's that you are trying to do a we do lesson around and a joint construction around what your text will look like, because you're using an I do, we do, you do model already, but you're not getting the participation of students in that we do session. And then when they head back to their desk, you feel like you have to start teaching the lesson all over again, because there's so many of them who just have missed the point somewhere along the way, or haven't picked up the finer points of what you've been trying to say. Whatever it is, I guarantee you they're pain points other people have as well, because we're all, so very similar as teachers, and this is one of the reasons that I really want to share this with you. So pop me your email address, give me your top 2 pain points for teaching writing in that contact box as well, and I look forward to hearing from you and producing the next video blog post for you. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and I'll talk to you soon.